Greetings, Israel. How are you? All of my Israelite brothers and sisters, adopted, grafted, heirs, joint heirs, natural, scattered, wherever you may be, whoever you are, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right over here. So Mark, the 7th chapter, Genesis, the 9th chapter, the third verse, and Mark, the 7th chapter, verses 14 and 15. And I think this person skipped down to verse 19 as well. These scriptures were in response to the video that I posted yesterday, Do I Need to Eat Clean? Let me lay this analogy down before I dive into this. You ever see one of those comic videos where it's on like Saturday Night Live, or it's on, you can see some on YouTube, where they will ask certain questions and they got like a person doing a fake interview and they ask a funny question and then they'll grab a prior interview from somebody like President Obama or President Bush, and when they'll grab a statement that they made in a real interview and they'll pull it in as a part of the skit, and it's the response based upon the question is funny, and you just be laughing your behind off. You'd be like, wow, that was creative, somebody who put that together. Whenever you grab a scripture out of the subject or out of the storyline for what it is intended to be applicable towards something else, it's not comical. It's not like one of those comic things you see. When you do that with the scriptures, it's deadly. It's dangerous. And the reason why it's dangerous is because people's souls are at risk. When you grab a scripture like Mark, the 7th chapter, verses 14 and 15, especially when you only grab 2 verses, it's not, and that verse says, it's not what goes into the body that defiles a man, it's what comes out of the mouth that defiles a person. So you see, Jesus made it plain and clear that you can eat anything you want, because it's not what goes into the body that defiles, it's what comes out. Wow. That's very dangerous when you do that. So let's bring that scripture into context unto the stage of the subject for which it was intended for. I'll deal with Genesis 9 and 3 in a second. In the book of Mark, the disciples had came in from the field. They were hungry. And being hungry, being in the field, whatever they were doing, there's no detail other than it was evident that their hands were dirty. And they had not washed their hands prior to going over wherever the food was being served. They just grabbed it without washing their hands, and they were scolded. The scribes and the Pharisees, who had a law that's not a commandment law, but it's just a law that they had among themselves, that whenever somebody is getting ready to eat, it's best that you wash your hands first. So when the disciples did not do that, they were scolded. So the question was asked. So Jesus simply responded by saying, wow, you all are worried about a law that the disciples broke that is not even a commandment, but yet you all have distorted one of the major commandments, all of them are major, of God, when it comes to honoring mother and father. What you have done is that you simply have distorted and minimized the validity of honoring mother and father. And you put more emphasis on washing hands before somebody eats. So Jesus, in making a point, says it's not what goes into the body that defiles a person, it's what comes out. It doesn't mean food. Had nothing to do with food. It did, but not eating clean food. It had to do with, do you wash your hands before you eat? If that scripture is not a license or not a change in the law to go eat anything you want to, go eat rats, go eat hogs, go eat lobster, go eat anything you want to, because it's not what goes into a person that defiles them, it's what comes out. That's not what Jesus was saying. I'm sorry. When you do that, you're taking a scripture, pulling it out, like one of these comic shows do in one of these cherry-picking interviews. You're cherry-picking the scripture, and it's not funny. It's deadly. When you tell people, this is where Jesus said we can eat anything we want to. You can eat any animal you want to. That's taking it out of context. In Genesis, the 7th chapter, I won't deal with Genesis 9 and 3. God told Noah, I want you to grab 7 sets of clean animals, male and female, and 1 set of unclean animals, male and female. And then it goes on through the story. You read the 7th chapter, the rest of the 7th, the rest of the 8th, and it gets over to the 9th chapter, and he says, all the beasts of the earth are good for you to eat. He wasn't talking about everything. When you know what the Most High is talking about, and you know the law, then what you do is you understand, and so therefore, he's referring to all the beasts that are clean. He's not going to separate and say, get 7 sets of clean animals and 1 set of unclean. I mean, really? You know, I can't even really say that, because I don't even want to say really as if I'm being critical, because it's serious. It's really serious. It's almost like you know how to count. You know, you're dealing with a person that knows how to count 1 through 5. Consecutive, and then you're teaching them, and you say, okay, good, you know how to count 1 through 5. Now 1 plus 1 equals 2, right? 1 equals 2. And they say, no, 1 plus 1 equals 3. And you sit there and you have them count all over again, and they do a good job, but when it comes to adding, you go 1 plus 1 equals 2. You see it now? And they say, no, I see 3. At that point in time, you can't be critical. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. So a person can read a book. A person can go through school. A person can become educated. But when it comes to the word, they can't get it. That's not funny. I can't even be critical when somebody takes Mark 7th chapter 14 and 15 out of context, when they don't read the entire story of Noah and the flood from the 7th chapter. Go back and just read. We have to learn how to read. But I can't even be critical, because sometimes your eyes are not open up when it comes to the scriptures. So when I got that about Mark the 7th chapter, I was those scriptures were put there on the chat portion, on the comment section, and I guess they wanted me to either address it this way, or maybe they were asking me. I don't know, so I'm not being critical of that person, but I'm just simply saying that it is a fact that people take Mark the 7th chapter, verses 14 and 15, completely out of context. And you got to be careful when you do that, because You got to realize that Isaiah 66 says that the Almighty, when he comes back with a consuming fire, he's going to consume all those that eats the swine's flesh and the mice and the abomination. And the abomination is seafood that is considered and labeled unclean